Just hoping you can maybe talk us through your process, the kind of woodcut process that you have created.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So basically, I'm kind of predominantly work in print, but not kind of exclusively, not solely. And one of the kind of often features of working within print is the interest in creating multiples. That's not what I'm interested in at all. So these are all kind of unique pieces, even the steel etching behind me. And one of the reasons that I'm doing that is to kind of reiterate the fact that I'm interested in printmaking and its kind of history and its social context in relationship to the actual medium. And I'm not trying to do it to create multiples, but I'm doing it for the kind of quintessential mark that you can find within the print process, woodcut here. And so, yeah, quite simply put, these were kind of all engraved, carved into birch wood like normal, and then, yeah, layered and layered and layered. And even though, there is a possibility and a chance for me to make that multiple, I just leave it at one, I leave it at unique. Because for another kind of aspect and interest I have with print is its ability to kind of, you can use it as a way to kind of retain control and create exactness, but also as a process to kind of lose control. And so within that process, within that making moment, insert another intelligence of the material of the process that kind of can maybe extend beyond the maker, the artist. And so that notion of how we can create objects or artworks that exert a greater intelligence than the kind of maybe what the artist intended as well, and extend beyond it, if that makes sense.
Would you say that with your etches and your woodcuts, that kind of printly process, you kind of transition that sometimes through your paintings? And
Yeah, no, definitely.
Thinking, mark making, language.
Yeah, definitely. That process kind of bleeds into everything I'm doing. If it's photography, if it's sculpture, if it's painting, and I think like the biggest way that kind of manifests itself is obviously with the print process. You're working in stages. It breaks it down. So at one moment you're carving that block, and that's when you're thinking about form. And then in another moment, at another day, then you've done all that carving and that form is there. That matrix is kind of finished, if you like. And then you begin to think about color. And so again, that's that same thing with painting on canvas. And often when I am painting on canvas, I do almost create a monoprint on it first, almost to get rid of that blank canvas in order to kind of work with the found image as well.
How do you think your practice has changed in terms of size? I know that you have a new large printing press.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you're very much going towards? You'd like to even get larger?
Well,
scale something that you really think about in your work now?
Yeah, I support. That's one of obviously the restrictions that normally comes with print is size. So having access to a large press where I can print large-scale works is exciting, and it brings more of the body in. When you are working with an 8-foot by 4-foot sheet of steel, you are kind of working at max capacity that you can your arms can reach and your body can take. But I often, like fluctuating between the kind of micro and the very small, and then, that expansive, more gestural bodily aspect. And then, the small that kind of has that intimate, more domestic quality to it as well.
Can you talk us through the etching process? So, for example, the lines, marks, and gestures in this work here.
Okay, yeah. So this is a steel etching. And so, I mostly work on steel, but sometimes with aluminium, etc. as well. And this is what kind of known as a spit bite. And so basically I have that sheet of steel, and then I'm actually painting directly onto the metal with acid. And so this what gives you this kind of bleeding, these different densities and strengths of mark making, and also this kind of blistering and burning. And it's also, another thing that I find interesting about print, and sometimes I have a problem with painting, is that one of the things that interests me about print is its indirectness. Again, that inserting that other intelligence. So in some ways you are working blind until a certain moment, and then you kind of wait for that moment of revelation, or that moment where you can actually kind of see what you've got. And again, you lose a bit of control, but that's kind of makes it more interesting as author, if you like. if that makes sense.
So would you describe yourself as a printmaker and not a painter, or would you have all of those kind of?
No, what's it called? Yeah, I just don't. Yeah, that split doesn't feel right for me. I like to think of print as a form of painting with that in a kind of different, with a different process in, dictating it. And so obviously there is a slightly different dialogue, but I'm interested in mark making. I'm interested in colour and form. All these things that you found, and in the history of painting as well, is there in print. I don't like that distinction. I'm just artist maker.
And for these woodcuts here, could you tell us about the framing and thought process that went into? Because this seems to be a kind of new way of working, thinking about the juxtaposition of framing with artworks, kind of placing it, one could say, back into nature with the kind of natural grain.
Yeah, I think you've said well. They're kind of back into nature. When you are working with paper, you've got to this kind of structural problem of how to present it, etc. It's got a fragility that I always feel kind of jealous of painters when they've just got this canvas that they can kind of just quite easily put on the wall. And so you begin to have to think about the frame and how it can be supported physically. But then here, I wanted to give it the space, and I'm using nice thick kind of cotton to print on, and I wanted to keep that kind of physicality of that object and that print and that artwork there, without, obviously here's got a smaller border and it becomes more about pure image, if you like, rather than the physicality of that image or that landscape having to exist on paper. And I think that's kind of also linked to how I'm not solely interested in trying to reflect or depict a landscape, but I'm interested in the artistic process that can actually make a new place, a new space from the original source of that landscape. And kind of highlighting the physicality of that paper can maybe lead on to that, if that makes sense.
I kind of seeing it as being part of your language, which has taken years and years and years to form. I just wondered if you could kind of just maybe touch upon some of the points, sort of pondering points within your language and your vocabulary and kind of how the artistic process forms and starts, and how you're always adding to your language.
Well, I kind of mostly fluctuate between Lisbon and London, so there's a kind of lot of movement there. But that kind of not being able to be quite in one place is quite an important thing for me, because it kind of creates this longing. And, colour, landscapes become more charged, memory becomes almost more vivid when I'm removed from it. So I work often from photographs, from drawings, from sketches, maybe created obviously in the landscape if it's photography, and then bring that into the studio. And it's being away from that landscape and being removed from that actually kind of allows me to charge it with memory, what I'm interested in, and how that landscape can contain it, and where that personal and those collective memories kind of collide. And so I think I've got, what's it called, when preparing or thinking about this talk that we were going to give today, I wanted to read a quote that I was kind of been important for my practice over the last a few years, etc. So it's a quote from Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time, and it's not long. This desire to create a work that's like a sign, like the glow on a wall that still reveals the location of a fresco that has worn away. So this idea of, obviously, when that fresco or that memory, that landscape begins to disappear, in its absence something else and a new image begins to be created.
I think as a kind of extension of that, your titles seem to be containers. They kind of bring to mind a lot of different notions, and they do just enough. They give you just enough kind of information about you and your work.
Yeah.
Kind of touch upon
with creating artworks, you kind of want to create something that's singular, that's non-exchangeable. You don't want it to be able to be pinned down and absolutely perfectly described within words. You want it to kind of be able to escape that. And so, often I, begin to work and begin with a title, begin with names, begin with text, because I feel like language has that kind of perfect balance that allows me to begin making a work that's kind of between both very specific but also the abstract, and that kind of balance is always very important to, as a beginning. As a beginning of something, I often, begin with titles and actually kind of almost try and find a work to match it rather than the other way around, if that makes sense.
So it's not really a starting or a kind of finishing point, it's just something to get you started.
Yeah, there's no kind of absolutes, and it's not always, but often it's the beginning.
And how do you find kind of working in a book of prints, which you might have put out, or a book of prints?
Well, one of the things of this kind of book, and exactly what I was kind of thinking about, was the density of the past, the density of memory. And so as soon as you obviously have, these are kind of just over 40 prints, kind of squidged together, it suddenly creates this kind of density. And the book's entitled A Conversation. And I was simply thinking about kind of reflecting this dialogue that's happened throughout human history between different depictions of humankind from different cultures. And so, when working with the book, this was conceived for a book. And so this kind of constant page turning became quite important and focused on that kind of almost overwhelming nature that you can find in the book, and then almost becomes nothing as soon as you close it again.
So the book again is a kind of container.
It's a container,
source of ideas.
And a physical structure in order to kind of be making work in.
Final point, just want to know what you're up to next and your plans for the future.
Well, I've really enjoyed doing the London Art Fair with Elizabeth Xi Bauer. But then, so on Monday, so very soon, I'm flying over to Lisbon to launch a box set and an exhibition at Galeria Diferença in Lisbon. And then the day after the opening, on the 16th, flying out to Brazil for a residency with Hermes Artes Visuais in Sao Paulo. And then also launching a book, A Conversation, with Desape. It's kind of an art gallery that specializes in artist books. And then finally concluding with a show out there in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, with the Bridge Project. And then returning to London in kind of May, June for an exhibition with Elizabeth Xi Bauer.
Fantastic, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.